Okay, so my feelings about the material generally are that the e.max system, IPS e.max system, is, as I said, it has the versatility now, it has the reliability, and it has always had the aesthetics. The main thing, what I try to do with the material now is I simplify everything, make everything as simple as possible. And what it actually does is, it's very difficult, it makes it very difficult for me to get this material wrong. And for the average technician, in most situations, it makes it very easy to get good results. Okay, so with Nikki's case, we have the implant solution here, as you see. I get to this position here, and really this is just my cervical wax on the surface of the preps. I don't want to have to wax everything up from the beginning again, so what I've done is taken the diagnostic wax work that I've previously done. James has transferred this into the patient's mouth, so I don't want to start from the beginning again on my master model. So what I do is take the diagnostic work that I've done previously and do a small putty matrix over the surface. Cut away at the margin, and then I heat this up. It's actually on the burnout furnace, just heat this up so it's nice and warm. And then what I can do is start to drip wax into here till it's really still soft. And then we can invert this on top of my previous wax up. And then when I take this away, it gets me to the original position that I know is going to work in the patient's mouth. And it's very simple from this point, just to do full anatomy wax up in the posterior region. So 4s, 5s, 6s, 3s, forwards is the layering technique on LT. This, I'm rewarded with this every day. I mean, it's such a joy to work on restorations like this when you've taken the time over the wax up and you get to this situation, your contact areas are in place, occlusal surface is in place, margins are perfect, palatal aspects of anterior teeth are completed. Really, I look at this now, the amount I have to do to this from this point is actually very little to make it look good. Okay, so what we have here, it's often ingot selection, which we go into on other occasions, but ingot selection is often a very difficult subject for a lot of people. But in this situation, we wanted a very natural result for Nikki. And so it was a B1 shade. But if you look at, this is LT-B1 in the anterior region and HT-B1 in the posterior region. Now there is a tendency sometimes to go for one shade lighter when you're doing monolithic. I don't find that that works for me that much with the lighter shades because I have to put too much stain on the surface. But the good thing about high translucency, as you see here against the object shade, it's actually slightly low in value. But the good thing about the staining technique or the stain and glaze technique is that the high translucency material matches the enamel area really well. So what we have to do then is take the shade paste, and very, very simply, this is why it's so available to everybody, really, is we just color the neck and really the enamel area. Trying to stain enamel to make it look translucent really is the wrong way around. So if the enamel area is already there, we just put the dentine color on the surface and it matches really well. And this is the basic principle with monolithic restorations. There is a tendency, I know a lot of people, I've kept this slide in because a lot of people now are using the Empress material, Empress Universal, whether that's right or wrong, but that maybe is another adaptability of the material. We're cross-matching these, but I prefer the shades, particularly in the A shades with the universal shade paste. Okay, this, if I had a laboratory and all I did is monolithic, I would be a happy man, really, because I'd have an hour for lunch, I'd finish work at 4 o'clock, I'd earn more money, and I'd be thinking about something else while I'm actually doing it as well, so, okay. Okay, so going back to the anterior region, the posterior region, we've already done some surface texture here, and then with the anterior region, this is with LT-B1. We go through this normal procedure. It's the foundation firing, and we fire this to a glaze on the surface. And then we go through with the dentine buildup, very, very simple. really it's the dentine's responsibility to send the overall restoration to the shade. It's not the ingot's responsibility. The ingot a lot of the time is responsible for the value, for the brightness of what we're trying to achieve. It's the dentine's responsibility to give you the chroma and the hue, the saturation of color and the color group. So incisal areas with the enamel, and then we have the firing, the initial firing. Okay. So this is something with training courses. I think I spend a lot of time with people, and I spend a lot of time in my own laboratory with surface texture, because surface texture is really, it's part and parcel of, or it's part of the overall form of the tooth. And the form of the tooth is worth 50% of your success. And part of that is surface texture. If the surface texture is correct, the way saliva adheres to the tooth is just like a natural tooth. If you get it wrong, if it's too glossy, or there's not enough surface texture on the surface of the tooth, it looks incorrect. So there is a method to surface texture. And this is something I've discovered over the years. Surface texture needs to be organized. Okay? So the surface texture that we initially put in is vertical. What we're looking at doing is creating vertical ridges rather than forming grooves. If it looks like you've formed a groove on the surface of the tooth, it looks mechanical. Okay? And I do this in unison, really. So if I'm working on multiple anterior teeth, then I work on the two central teeth at the same time. So what happens is, if the two central teeth are aligned, then the surface texture on those will mimic each other exactly. What it allows you to do is offset teeth, and you get harmony without symmetry anymore. Okay, so smooth this surface texture out initially, and it's only when you finish the vertical ridges on the surface of the tooth, the grooves form the ridges. It's only when you finish the vertical ridges on the surface of the tooth can you then go on to the horizontal undulations on the surface. And the idea of this is to interrupt your vertical line angles or your vertical ridges on the surface. We'll put some fault lines in the surface of the tooth, and then we polish the surface back. The idea with surface texture is we're putting surface texture in 10 years younger than the tooth that we want to finish, okay? By glazing, we polish and glaze the years into the surface of the tooth, and that gives us the end result correctly. Okay, so then we go through with the glazing on the surface of that, and that's pretty much me done, James. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks to Rob. It's always a concern when you're doing a 40-minute presentation with two of you, who's gonna stitch up the other one in running over. And so far, neither of us have done that. So it's Dan, I can only ruin it. But what we're going to do here is just quickly follow Nikki through to the finish, which is a very, very quick thing to do. I get the work back from Rob, and obviously we're talking about the implant solutions, and this really shows how easy it makes our work as clinicians. And certainly for me, when I'm restoring implants, I really want the margin to be as close to being sort of juxtagingival as I possibly can in many situations. I think a big issue with the long-term bioavailability of implants is residual cement, as we know. And the beautiful thing about the implant solutions is Rob can really customize, position that margin for me, and also make any margin aesthetic as well. So when this goes in, even if we did have any recession, this isn't a very aesthetic solution, and it does open up so many more possibilities, both in terms of aesthetics and I think in long term in terms of survivability of the restorations. And you can see in the mouth, because of the way we recorded the information, as I said, whether that's going to be because you've been making a lab-made, customized temporary implant, and then you're picking that up, or in this case, whether we're copying the existing tissue position, but we can see where the margin placement is very, very convenient for me as a restorative dentist, but also how healthy the situation is as well. And then I can try the restorations in, and because of, I mean, it's, to me, is one of the best things that's been about the e.max system, whether we're dealing with it as a non-prep situation or as we're dealing with a much more sort of traditional type prep situation because of what was pre-existing, the fit and the accuracy, and therefore the lack of stress involved in restoring these is exponentially different. These restorations just seat, they seat perfectly, and it makes life a lot more simple for us as restorative dentists, especially in the no prep situations where things just locate so efficiently. So I'm not really going to go over a huge amount about the cementation of Nikki's case because there's so many lectures on these topics coming up over the next few days, but hopefully it's just going to give you a good overview of the systems that Rob and I would go through. Posteriorly, when I have cases like this that are reasonably heavily restored before and wherever I have sort of deeper margins, I tend to cement the units one by one, and I find that multi-link has been a real game changer in many ways in the ease of seating some of these posterior units when we're dealing with lithium disilicate restorations. We can seat them one by one, and it's very, very easy to clean up. It makes it very straightforward. I can seat the more mesial restoration at the same time just to make sure no cement or bond gets on the tooth, and because they fit so accurately, there's no contamination of the other tooth, and it becomes a very easy, just cookbook type of solution to restoring these cases. So all of her posterior dentistry is seated, and normally I just do a wave cure like you can see here, and then I can just peel this cement off, which just makes life very, very easy, and when it's done, it's done. So we end up with the posterior situation seated like this, and then the anterior restorations are going to be cemented all in one go with VeriLink 2, in my case, or these days maybe I'll be using some of the new advances in, say, VeriLink Aesthetic, for example. So this is the case actually seated, immediately post-op and cleaned up, and we go through the normal protocols for this. And I think a lot of people say, for example, with the VeriLink system that it's difficult to use, or they're concerned about the cleanup. I think it's really just about spending time and about just having confidence in the material and the fact that it's not going to suddenly be setting on you, and just taking the time to clean it up. And we were talking in the panel discussion yesterday about VeriLink Aesthetic, the new VeriLink being easier to clean up. But at the same time, if you manage this properly, if you clean it up nicely at the start, and then if we go ahead and use the small spot tacking tip that Ivoclar make for their lights, then it gives us the ability just to cure this for 2 to 3 seconds in the mid-facial. And then by doing that, it means that I can have a very, very easy cleanup with some flosses, or whether I need a tiny little sort of Brasler saw or something like this, just to go ahead and break any areas that cured up. But it makes it very predictable for us to clean up these restorations and just get something with no excess that's predictable with a proven bond strength. And so the summary of all of that is really what we achieved for Nikki. So she wanted a natural smile, she wanted something that was more healthy, and she has that. We have minor imperfections in the tooth positioning, some minor rotations in the laterals, which was a real sort of a joy to be able to provide, because so many of our patients don't want this kind of thing. And if we're looking a little bit closer, the tissue adaptation, the way the implant is integrating from Rob's Implant Solutions. And then more importantly, because let's face it, not everyone walks around with retractors in their teeth, is just the full face, and the ability of the materials that we have and the planning that we went through, and then Rob's technical work gives us the opportunity to create a smile that's not only natural, but also healthy. And I'd just like to say thanks very much. I hope that sets the maybe some thoughts going for the rest of the day, not only in how to think about some of these cases, but also how to think about when we shouldn't be doing cases, and how to make sure the cases we're doing in the first place are set up properly to allow us to do more health-driven and more ethically correct cosmetic dentistry for our patients. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and I hope England win at football this evening.